We found an old abandoned house. We were hiding in there. It was like a crinkly, like zombie apocalypse. I'm telling them to be quiet. And I heard my wife say, Danielle, what is that? And I looked back and it was my wife and my daughter. And whoa, these things are 15 feet tall. They eat people. I have to hide my family. And then when my family was put in there, I failed.
Hi, Danielle. How are you? It's nice to meet you.
Hi, Keisha. It's nice to meet you too. How are you?
I'm very well. Where are you tuning in from?
Billings, Montana in the United States.
Yeah, I've been to the States a few times, actually, particularly to visit Mount Shasta. I've been there about 3 times in my life. And just traveling around and doing other things as well. Sedona has called me a couple of times as well.
Oh, right on. Yeah, Sedona's beautiful. And so is Mount Shasta. Northern California is really pretty. I've never been to Australia. I want to go to Australia. It's on my bucket list.
It's beautiful. Yes. Highly recommend. I'm on the West Coast in Perth. So most people tend to go east side. They tend to go like Sydney, Melbourne, some of the big cities. But Perth is actually really beautiful. It's not as hyped up as some of the other things. But actually, on the topic of UFOs, Perth is a hotspot. We have a lot of activity here.
Yeah, you guys do, actually. You guys in all of Australia have a lot of activity down there. Probably because everybody's running to get away from the Southern Hemisphere.
That's funny. Well, thank you so much for meeting me. So let's dive in. I mean, I know you have quite a range of talents. I have done quite a bit of research on you. I've looked at your website. I've had a look at some of the stuff that you talk about. Physical, tangible experiences, particularly relating to UFOs, UAP, connection with beings, anything in that sort of spectrum. So have you had any experiences that are maybe like physical experiences of UFOs? Do you have any photographs? Maybe we'll start there.
I've had a lot of physical experiences here in Montana. I mean, we know the difference between a satellite and a weather balloon and something in the sky that doesn't move like either of those things or move like near the space station, because we don't have a lot of light pollution out here. So we're the 4th largest state in the US, and we only have just over 1 million people. So we have a lot more cows, chickens, sheep, UFOs than we do human beings out here. So I actually have quite a bit of experience, firsthand experience in dealing with these beings. And I was contacted, 3 times total that I remember. But most of this contact time was when I was between the ages of about 24 and about 32. And then recently, summer before last, I had to think about it because COVID screwed me all up. I was like, what year is this anyway? But when I first was reached out towards, I guess is the best way to put it, I was in my bedroom. I was actually probably around 20 years old. I was in my parents' house here in Montana. I wrote about this experience in my book, True Tales of the Truly Weird. And I was in a single bed with my best friend, Penny. Like when you're in college and you just crash, right? You're just like, who cares? So we're like smashed in this bed together and she's asleep and I have a hard time sleeping just because of all the sensitivities that I have. So I'm laying there and I'm staring at the ceiling, and all of a sudden on the ceiling, this really beautiful rippling, kind of a golden yellowish rippling pattern comes up on the ceiling. Like, Isha, have you ever been in a pool, an indoor pool, and you look up, that refractive light? That's what it looked like. It looked like refracted water, yet it was yellow. And it was so calming. I was just laying there looking at it. I'm in this bed with my bestie. So I've got my hands in the old coffin position here because I don't want to smack her in the face. So I'm sitting here like this. I'm thinking, oh my God. And I'm just resting. And it's so calm that I'm not saying, what the hell is a refractive light pattern doing on the ceiling of a basement bedroom? Oh no, it's so calming. I'm just looking at this like, wow, pretty lights on the ceiling, So I'm sitting there and I'm just watching this happen. Intriguingly enough, not questioning what's going on, because I've come to learn later that can be an approach pattern if they're actually trying to make sure that you're not going to be twitchy or freak out or move if they actually come into your bedroom. So I'm laying there and I can't move at this point. I'm just laying there and I'm looking up and I'm like, wow, this is beautiful. Then I see on the ceiling, if you could imagine a hole that was opening up this way, that was backlit through the ceiling. So I can't see the floor because I can't move my head. I can't move. What I see is this thing on the ceiling that does this. And it's all this light just erupting, like there was a hatch in the floor is what it looked like. And I just sat there and looked at it. And at the same time, I could hear mechanics. I could hear something opening. And it sounded, sorry to say it, but it sounded like a Star Trek episode. I mean, it was just a lot of pressure. And it was just this big, and so as soon as it was opening, I realized it was some kind of a hatch or something. And again, one would think, wow, there's a hatch in my floor. There's lights on my ceiling. But I'm just like, oh, this is interesting. I'm just laying there being chill because they got their little thing going on that they do to keep you sedated, just chilled out. So as I'm watching this light open up, this mechanical sound or this pulsing sound is very loud, just like if you opened a hatch and something was loud on the other side of it. Then I'm watching these shadows and keeping in mind, I'm looking at the ceiling. I can't turn my head and look because I can't move at all. I'm watching these shadows come up what I would assume is a ramp or something, because the shadows were changing shape. You know, when something has a proximity away from light, the actual shadow will change shape. So it's changing shape, and it's these beings, there's 3 of them. They come up this ramp, they turn a corner. And the weird part about this, and this is what caught me as weird, is that the shadows had a very weird attribute. When they turned the corner, it reminded me of, if you remember the Muppet Show 10 million years ago that used to be on, and there was a Muppet called Gonzo, and it was this kind of strange, kind of hooking looking, I couldn't really make it out because it was just a shadow of this, but it reminded me of like a beak. I don't actually think it was a beak, but that's what it reminded me of. So these beings came and I could peripherally see, they weren't very tall. They were maybe now 4 feet tall, 3.5, 4 feet tall. And all 3 of them lined up by the side of my bed. Now I'm starting to get a little nervous. So at this point, I'm looking above me and I notice there is this, I would guess it was probably 3 by 6 foot floating rectangle that was grayish color, like a matte piece of cellophane is what it looked like. And it floated right over the top of me. And I know it was between me and the ceiling because it cut the light on the ceiling. Like if you were looking through sunglasses, you know, it cut that ripple. And that's why it reminded me of cellophane, because I could see through it. And I thought, what the hell is that? And it just came right down and settled right on top of me. Now, what was weird about that is I, again, can't move. So as this thing is coming down, you know, if something comes within proximity of your face, what do? You move your face back, right? Well, I can't move my face back, but I still move back. And a very interesting thing happened. My consciousness was separate from my body. Okay. So it was kind of like if you could imagine a Halloween mask, right? If you had a Halloween mask on and then you pulled back and you kind of see through the eyeballs back here. And I did it a couple of times. And I actually said to myself, wow, they can't get me in here. They can take my body, but they can't actually get me in here because they can't get in here. Like I was very aware that I was separate from my body. So this thing kind of settles down on me. Well, right about that moment, that's when that survival weird thing kicked in. And I thought, oh my God, there's 3 things I can see peripherally. I couldn't see them well. Next to me, my friend's on the other side. She's by the wall. I'm the unlucky chump who's by the hatch in the floor. So I'm just sitting here and I had this panic. Like I have to reconnect with my body. I have to sit up because if they're going to do this to me, and I knew they were going to take me somewhere. I just knew it. And I thought if they're going to take me somewhere, they might take my friend Penny too. And I wasn't as much worried about me, weirdly. I was worried more about her. So because I had such a acute recognition that they'd somehow separated the consciousness from the body. And I've since talked to a lot of these beings about how they do that. It's super fascinating science. But I could feel it. It was down right here, right at the base of my skull. So I literally said to myself, just connect up, connect. And it reminded me of when you screw a hose on a house. That's what it felt like. And I did. And I just connected back up, and I was able to push myself up on my elbows. And my head was back, it was kind of this way because I didn't have full command of the whole enchilada, but I was able to push myself up. And when I pushed myself up, I could peripherally see, because I'm still staring at the ceiling. Also, I could see the shadow of these three beings. They, in unison, all three of them, stepped back off the bed. They were like, whoa. And this gray thing that had settled down, this cellophane blanket, whatever it was, it just shot right off of me. And I could feel the impulse from these beings and their tech. It was dead surprise. It was just like, whoa, we didn't expect that to happen. Okay. And then the gray thing kind of moved off. I'm still up on my elbows. I'm trying to turn my head, but I still don't have enough juju to do that. I'm watching these shadows on the ceiling go back down what I'm just going to call a ramp in the floor. And as we know, a lot of these beings do a lot of space-time bending. And so they can be in two places at one time. It's pretty fascinating stuff. So they went down their little ramp, and I heard the Star Trek hatch sound, and, it closes, and I watched the light, disappear on the ceiling. And then I heard the mechanical pulsing sound just kind of take off and head out like it was moving away. And I stayed up on my elbows for quite a long time until I could actually move more of myself. And by the time I could move more of myself, my neck was killing me because my head had been kind of flopped back for quite a long time. So that was the first time that I can recall meeting up with these beings. And they were remarkably surprised that I broke this, whatever they were doing. And it was, I just knew that if I connected my consciousness with my body, I'd be able to get up. So that was the first time.
So because you were able to do that, they didn't end up taking you. Is that what you think happened?
They did not. Not that time. They got smart the second time, but not that time. Then about 4 years later, they evolved, man. So about 4 years later, I was in Seattle, and I was about 24 at this time. And I didn't sleep on the edge of the bed after this anymore. I was like, to hell with that. I always shoved my bed against the wall. I slept against the wall. So at least I had some room on my bed to not deal with these beings. So I was laying there looking at the wall, and the wall was about this far from my face, and on the wall, there was that same exact pretty gold pattern, that beautiful pattern right there. And I said to myself, wow, that's and I literally was like, wait a minute. And then boom, I was plunged into a dream. And I was dreaming that I was sitting in a circle with a bunch of people I didn't know in a room that had been painted like a dark navy blue or black. And there was a really unremarkable 10-gallon forest green Rubbermaid garbage can in the middle of this circle of people. And there was probably maybe 30 people in there. And we were all sitting there, and everybody was holding hands in this circle. And there was a woman directly to my left, and I had a hold of her hand. And she had this very hypnotic voice, and she was saying, I want you all to, focus on the garbage can. We're going to levitate the garbage can. We're going to do it collectively. And she had this very calm way of speaking. And I remember looking at everybody, and nobody appeared to be aware that I was there. Like, I was aware they were there, but nobody looked at me. Everybody was kind of zoned out on this garbage can. So I look at this woman who was remarkably odd looking. She was human-ish, and she had a very, very, very long neck that was overly thin. but the proportions were they weren't right. Something wasn't right there. So I was just like, okay, this is going to get weird. And I looked down at her hand. Her hand was really, really, really cold. And I looked down and her hand looked like this. But if these were fingers right here. And it's kind of like her human costume was sort of like only from the waist up. I mean, the hand was not working at all. Wasn't scared. I was irritated. I remember not being afraid. I was irritated. And I let go of her hand telepathically. And I said, I'm done with this. I'm done with this. So I got up and went out the door. And then I was plunged way deeper into a foggier dream. And it was harder to navigate this space. And it was a 1920s county fair. Lots of yellows and soft colors and balloons and like an idealistic 1920s county fair. Like there's nothing threatening at a county fair in the 1920s. Nothing. All the smells were so acute. All the popcorn and the everything and the sounds of the carousel and the barkers. And there was this guy hitting the thing that goes bing and you win a prize. And I'm still irritated. And I know that I've been shoved deeper into a dream and I'm wandering around and I'm pissy, to be quite frankly. I'm pissy. And I'm just like, this is stupid. And I'm saying out loud in this dream, in this simulation that they've got me under, I said, you guys, this is dumb. I am not in a county fair. Okay. It is not 1920. It's 1993 or whatever it was, 92 or 93. I said, this is really ridiculous. And then all of a sudden, boom, I was in another dreamscape. And there were dogs. It was night. There were dogs barking. There were flashlights flashing. There was bomb sirens going off. There were two people with me, and they were wearing concentration camp clothes. And we had broken out of a concentration camp, and we were running away from the Nazis. And I sadly, automatically engaged this simulation because I was like, crap, I have to protect these people, right? I didn't get into this is stupid. Why am I in a dream with Nazis and flashlights and people in a concentration camp? Because it was so scary. They had to resort, which is really sad. They tried to have two really kind simulations to run on me so I would not be paying attention to whatever it was they were doing. And I didn't bite. I was aware of them and I didn't bite. It wasn't until I got to a fear space. They finally, the third time was the charm, but I didn't want to go there. But I think they were like, let's just poke her monkey button. She's going to freak out if she has to save other people. So we'll just poke that button. And unfortunately, I did stay completely engaged with that simulation. And I was running around and hiding the people and the Nazis would almost catch us and we'd run and find a new place. And then all of a sudden I just wake up and it's the middle of the afternoon. I'm in Seattle and I remember saying, I dropped the F-bomb. I was like, okay, I think they got me that time. I don't know what they did or where they took me, but they had to keep me preoccupied so I would not disengage from whatever they were doing. So that was time number 2. Then nothing happened for a long time. I guess they got what they needed after that. And it was right after that. And this might some people may consider this crossing a woo-woo line, yet I would encourage people not to think this because a lot of the tech that our off-world cousins have is energetic tech. It's not just like little trinkets and things and metal implants, So a lot of what they have are sensor fields and whatnot that they can put in our energetic field, actually. And they get a lot of information off those energetic fields. We do a lot of communicating with spirit. There's a lot of science behind it. It's not woo-woo. So after that experience in Seattle when I was about 24, I remember I would go to pray or whatever, and I felt like I was just hitting a lid, like I was hitting something, and it just bugged the crap right out of me. So at the time in Seattle, I went to go see, she was a psychic who was recommended to me because she dealt with people who experienced contact with alien races. And here's the grand irony, considering what I do. I thought it was hokey as crap. I was like, are you shitting me with this lady? She looked like Stevie Nicks. I was just like, you got to be shitting me with this. So I was like, all right, well, that's fine. So I go in and I wasn't really biting. I wasn't buying what she was selling per se, but she sits about 10 feet across the room from me and she says, she's not touching me. She's just doing her psychic thing. And she says, oh, you have an implant in your crown chakra. This is no lie, Isha. And I think to myself, I have an implant in my crown chakra. Okay, witchy lady. I was just like, this woman's a flake, whatever. And she says, I'm going to remove it for you. And I said, well, you just do that, because when you're 20, I was a bit of a saucy 24-year-old. So she's not touching me. She's energetically removing this thing. Now, here's the best part. I'm just sitting there thinking, this is the stupidest $20 I've ever spent in my life, right? And I'm like, this is ridiculous. All of a sudden, I'm feeling my head. I'm getting lifted up by my head. Like if somebody, and I'm on a crinkly couch, it's leather. So you can hear the leather couch uncrinkling because I am moving up. Like if somebody lifted you up, like if I had a football helmet, an American football helmet on, and they were trying to lift me up, and it was not super comfortable. So I kept coming up and coming up and coming up. And then I felt like a helmet is what it felt like, just pull off the top of my head. And I physically saw, keep in mind how skeptical I was of this whole thing, I physically saw this flock of swallows. It was swallows. They kind of came out from the back of me and tweeted and flew through the glass in the window. Like they didn't break the glass because they were etheric birds, but it was the weirdest thing I'd ever seen. And I'm looking at them and witchy ladies looking at them. We're both looking at them. And I could, all of a sudden I could feel the top of my head again. I could hear everything again at that point, but it was a physical feeling of what she was taking off of me. And she did not touch me. So that was my first entry into the fact that there's a lot of tech that a lot of some of these off-world races will noodle with, and they do sit in the energetic fields. So then nothing happened. I think I was like the sea turtle that got tagged and then I lost my tag. So they couldn't find me for a really long time. And I was, last summer, my wife and myself and both my sisters-in-law were up here in Montana on Big Pryor Mountain. And Big Pryor Mountain, like Perth, has a whole bunch of UFO sightings coming and going. And Big Pryor Mountain was actually a really, really profound uranium mining site in World War II. So it's a very radioactive place. There's a lot of off-worlders coming and going. We were camping and we're just watching the sky, when it's camping. And the stars are starting to come out. And there's a few really honking big planets right over our campfire. But it's not dark yet. It's that milky time when the stars start to come out. And we'd all been just sitting there, hanging out, eating dinner, watching the stars come out. And one of them that we'd been looking at that was huge. It was and I'm like, wow, that's a really big planet. It'd been up there stationary. It just took off. It just started moving. So I say to it, hey, you guys, come back. Take us for a joyride. This would be great. Come back and share the campfire, blah. So they came back later that night. And this is a craft from Sirius AB. I had a little bit of a cultural misunderstanding with them. And I think they thought I was wanting to just go. So they were outside. They kept trying to get me to leave the camper. I was not going to leave the camper. And they were trying to, I guess, compelling is the wrong word, but it was like a thought that was laid over the top of my head that wasn't mine. Because they were right there, and it was just like this, you should go outside. I'm like, I'm not going to go outside. There's grizzly bears up here. Do you know where we are, you guys? Like, I'm not going outside. And they kept just pouring it on. You need to go outside. And I said to them, I'm not going outside, you guys. I'm just not. And I grabbed onto my wife. I said, I'm not going outside. And we had a cultural misunderstanding, and it's very important I explain it this way, because our off-world friends are not here to terrorize us or do terrible things to us, okay? At least most of them aren't. And so what they considered me doing was they don't understand exactly the way that we bond with our family group, because they have a whole different chemical system than we do. We're a very chemically driven species. We have a lot of brain chemistry that dictates what we do. So they were looking in my brain and saying, oh, she feels that this being that's next to her, she has some alliance to this being, and that's why she's staying. So then the implied thought that came in was, you're terrible for your family. Your family doesn't need you at all. As a matter of fact, you're probably a deficit. You should come outside. So they were trying to find a bridge without understanding really our family groups all that well or how we bond. They were trying to alleviate my worry that the person next to me would be worried if I left by trying to choose something in the data bank up here that would create distance. We had a little bit of a hiccup there because I'm just laying there now, I'm panicking, and I'm like, you guys, this is not true. My wife loves me. My family loves me. This is not cool, you guys. And then and this is all happening in my head, okay? I'm not saying anything. My wife all of a sudden says, what is going on? Because she can feel this energy shift, the whole thing. And I explained to her what's happening. And I said, they want me to go outside. And she grabs right a hold of me and she goes, you are not going outside. I said, I am not going outside. So this went back and forth, this weird compelling feeling, this whole bizarre thing, probably for about 45 minutes. It was really exhausting. And there was another being on that mountain that was not an alien being, an extraterrestrial. It was not an off-worlder. And it was a being that had encountered those beings in that being's lifetime. So here comes this being down, and it surprised me more than anything. It was a crow man from the Crow Nation here, and his head had been twisted, and it was just laying down his back. So here comes this specter of a being, goes through the trailer, goes out and says something to these beings, and they leave. And again, somebody might think this is getting woo-woo, but this is very important if we're going to deal with ufology, if we're going to deal with ancient aliens, if we're going to deal with the history of UFOs, especially in this part of the country, where you can go crawling around in the priors, and there are actual pictographs of UFOs out there. So this ties with that. So this crow man, this ghost of a crow man, is explaining to me that these beings had been coming there for generations. And they didn't belong there. He didn't feel that they belonged there. And what had happened to him, he had run into them. They didn't do that to him. It was something that had happened to him when he was on a horse. Like he didn't see the craft and just smacked right into it and it broke his neck. So he had a not good feeling with the off-worlders and just scurried him off. And I woke up the next day. I had the worst headache of all time. It was horrific because we were having this telepathic conversation and we had a cultural misunderstanding because I realized that they weren't trying to terrorize me. They were just trying to get me to come out because I said, hey, come on, let's hang out. Give me a joyride, So I have now learned to communicate a little better with our folks from Sirius AB because we had a little misstep there. So those are my 3 firsthand experiences that I recall with off-world craft, off-world beings. The ones with the hatch I was talking about earlier, I don't believe they were from Sirius. I think they were Oturan, the Arcturians, people call them. And so that's who I think they were. And that the lady with the 3 fingers, Oturan also. This was Sirius. It was Sirius, but it was Sirius. I was a little freaked out, but they were different. They were different cultures of beings. And the Oturan have a much better way of communicating with human beings. They're the ones that delivered to us the seeds of what humanity later developed into Buddhism, Taoism, all these different things. So they're a little more chill and they jam a little better with us. And the folks from Sirius are they are the terraformers, they're the explorers, they're the let me help you build an irrigation system and a pyramid to run your community. So they're not quite as touchy-feely as the Oturan, but they were going to give me a ride. I just was not going to go. So those are my 3 firsthand experiences.
That's a lot. I wonder, you kind of did ask for that 3rd one. I wonder what would have happened if you just gone outside and gone for a ride.
No, I do too. And had they been cool about it, had they implied like, hey, we're your off-world pals, just come outside and just say hi and we'll, bring your wife, something. But there was a cultural hiccup there. And they're very literal. The folks from Sirius are incredibly literal. They're not an allegorical species. That's actually kind of racist. They are not allegorical beings. So they are very, very black and white by our standards. And I didn't know who I was dealing with, really. I kind of did, but it was the middle of the night.
So back then, I mean, it sounds like you weren't really psychic or doing any of that stuff. When did that shift for you?
I've actually always been psychic, always. I just thought everybody else was to the degree that I was. Because if I can see the color purple, shouldn't you? Right? So I always had this ability. I did not think it was abnormal. It wasn't unusual to me to see beings, to see spirits, to see off-worlders. I would see off-worlders in Seattle all the time. I would catch them in reflections of the inside of the glass. They were in the house, but I couldn't see them directly because they've got that really awesome light bending technology that they have. And it just bends all the way around them. And if anybody's wondering what that is, if you Google houses made of mirrors, it's sort of kind of a similar effect where the house goes invisible because it's all covered in mirrors. So I always had this ability and didn't call myself an unofficial psychic until I was in my 30s. And that was a whole other journey, how I even got there. So I think maybe they knew that I could sense them or see them or feel them or talk to them, and they were just trying to do their thing, maybe.
Well, that experience of, lifting up the trash can, that's a familiar experience for me, because that's actually my understanding of that is that's actually a test. Like they're testing, they're not like you were the only one lifting up that bin. They were like, we need everyone involved. Everyone else is there just for show. They're trying to see if you can do it, so that's.
Well, I got it. I didn't know this enough. I was like, this is dumb. And then down it went. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's a familiar experience for me. I've been put through that before as well. And as you were talking about it, it just like sparked a memory. I'm like, oh yeah, like I've had that experience too, because they're actually testing your capacity in that particular experience. I don't know what happened after that, why they put you under, but they must have wanted to test your consciousness first, and then whatever else that happened after that, they would have done something else. So I feel like that's a common experience that other people probably have as well.
I have heard that also from contactees that they've had like a little test. The folks from Oturan, not the serious folks, the Oturan will come, and they've given me 2 drills when I'm sleeping. I was just citing awake, like fully awake things that I could recall. And the drills, the tests that they give me when I'm sleeping, they would run me through some fear scenarios. And if I didn't engage the fear, then they would pop up. They would pop up, and they were wearing their little white, their little white roby things with the little short collars with the little, looks like kind of a funky, if it were our cloth, it'd be sort of a cousin of terry cloth or something. I don't even know. And then they're just sitting there with their little eyes, and they just look at you like, good job. All right. You didn't freak out. That was good. I flunked the very last one they gave me. The very last one was over the top. And there was an ice tornado. And I was like, okay, an ice tornado. Then there was a UFO that came out of the ice tornado. And it was these reptilian looking mean aliens. And I mean, it was so over the top. They were dressed in like Egyptian gear. And I'm looking at this going, you guys, really? Alligator face beings with Egyptian gear on from an ice tornado? Is this a sci-fi movie, you guys? And then I heard in the simulation in my dream, I heard my wife say, Danielle, what is that? And I looked back, and it was my wife and my daughter. And whoa, I completely disengaged from being able to be rational about how ridiculous the whole thing was. Because I was like, oh my God, these things are 15 feet tall. They eat people. I have to hide my family. And so I think they were testing to see where my biological instinct was going to kick in, because I was kicking all of this stuff out. I'm like, this is you guys. And then when my family was put in there, I failed. I failed the fear test. We found an old abandoned house. We were hiding in there. It was like crinkly, like zombie apocalypse. I'm telling them to be quiet. And then I just woke up. And then the minute I woke up, I'm like, well, that was one of those drills. I just bombed it. So they actually haven't been around since I bombed the drill. I guess maybe they were needing somebody who wouldn't bomb the drill. Maybe I bombed the drill, so they let me off the hook. I don't know.
That's very interesting. So since then, you haven't had any experiences?
Well, the one that I just told you about with the dream where I bombed the drill, that was before the Sirius AB issue where they wanted to take me for a joyride. So that was probably maybe, I don't know, a year before that. And this last little ditty was last year.
What have you learned about this off-world technology and some of the things that they're capable of doing?
Wow. Well, the reason I'll start with the reason that I would say, one of the things that I am and I've been blogging about this since 2012. Back in the days when you used to be able to check to see who came in, the URL that came in to see your blog, they don't allow that anymore. But you used to be able to see who surfed in. And in 2012, 2009, I was breaking down how these craft fly. And I was posting it on my blog because I'm an astrophysics person. I love physics. I love science. I'm all into that fabulousness. And so I was talking to these off-worlders about how they create craft that float. And they were the Sirius AB guys. And they told me straight out, well, it doesn't float. What they do is they have two forms or two engines, I guess, that you could call them, sort of, that I've noted. They might have billions, but the two that I'm familiar with, one is a hull on the inside and a hull on the outside, and they spin this way. And in the middle of those hulls is the closest thing we'd have is like, we think of it as mercury, but it's not mercury. It's an alloy we actually cannot produce because they can fuse molecules. They can do all kinds of things. And it's a very, very magnetically charged alloy, but it looks like it's not, mercury is like gray and gross, the element mercury. This looks like, because I've seen it, I've looked at it. It looks like the shiny side of a CD. Remember CDs? And like, you can see like it makes refracted light and it makes prisms. And this particular metal, when agitated or spun in a contrary way, creates an electromagnetic field around the hull of the craft. And what that does is it creates a density barrier in the same way that we can take a several hundred gazillion ton aircraft carrier made of metal and it floats on the ocean. It displaces the electromagnetic field, displaces the electromagnetic field of the Earth's atmosphere, and it creates basically a hull around the ship. It creates an atmospheric hull that floats on the tensile strength or the tensile density of the Earth's atmosphere. So that's what, and I've been talking about this for years and years, this tech. And the reason we can't really do it well is because we can't recreate this element, this thing, this liquid metal thing. We have other ways of creating electromagnetic barriers. If you see triangle craft, those are typically ours, meaning ours in the United States that we're not supposed to tell anybody that we make under the military contractors that even the poor president doesn't have access to. Triangle is ours, round is theirs. So the triangle shape we can manage to kind of get to levitate. We can't do it with an orb. So that's one way. The other way that they power their ships is they have this thing. Most of them are about yay big. Like it reminds me of, seriously, like an 11 by 14 piece of paper. It's not very big. And it's about maybe quarter inch thick. I saw one that was a half inch thick one time. I don't know why. And what it looks like, all it looks like is a scratched up milky piece of plexiglass is exactly what it looks like. And what it is, it's some kind of, from what I can tell, they had to explain it to me in kind of dumbed down terms. If you imagine pouring a layer of glass, a super, super nano micro thin layer of crystalline glass, and then scoring it a certain way. And then you pour another one over the top of it and you score it a certain way. But for some reason, when you layer it, it doesn't fill the cracks. Okay. So you've got tons and tons, like a baklava. Have you ever had baklava, Greek baklava? The phyllo dough, right? It's tons of these really super thin layers that are micro scored. And it's the nature of this material that draws in energy. It draws in all kinds of energies, not just electromagnetism. And because of the microscores, from what I was to understand by this guy who was explaining it, this being that was explaining it to me, if I take this thing and I plug my phone into it, and the phone needs power because my battery is low, this thing will attenuate itself to how much power is needed and pull just enough through this doohickey in to power my battery. Now I can take this same thing and hook it up to San Francisco. And if everybody turns on their lights at the same time, that thing is going to draw enough energy in. And of course, this gets into M theory and string theory and multiverses, and good old Tesla, who was doing this back in the day, and they seized all of his research in science, and it'll power San Francisco. So basically, it pulls the power that is needed. It doesn't generate power, it pulls power. So I've seen both of these on different craft. And I think we have a hell of a time trying to reverse engineer any of that, because the closest we've got is nanotubes, but we're still way out. We're still way out of understanding what this crystalline polymer, don't even know what to call it, thing is that they microscore to create that magnet effect. It does have a ferromagnetic quality to it. I did notice that, which I was very interested in. Again, astrophysics geek over here. But I was just like, I'm like, wow, this is really cool. So, I mean, there's a lot of different tech, and I know you know this, Isha, because you talk with these beings all the time. But our star family they want to give us free energy. They want to give us technology so we don't starve, so that we're fine. And it's not the off-worlders that are preventing this from getting to us. It is our money-grubbing corporations that don't want to give it up.
I just, as you were talking, drew a little picture here. If I connect it to me, will it work? Is that kind of like what you were describing? Like with the rainbow sort of torus field on the inside?
It's liquid. It's just this liquid. And where I've seen it, and maybe there's something like that too. The one that I saw was just in a plain old cylinder, this liquid, and it was spinning inside really fast. And then on the outside of the hull, in between the two hulls, there was more of it. So this one's going this way real fast in the center of this craft, and the other one is going around it this way. And this is the actual diagram that I put up online years and years and years ago. It's still up if you go to calltolight.org, it's still up there. And the one thing I noticed that was so fascinating is when I looked to see who was coming in to look at those, it was all the Navy base in Guam. The Navy base in Guam was hitting that page like crazy and checking out the schematics of this thing, which I thought was very interesting. Like, all right, you guys, well, now I can't see that information anymore with WordPress, but back in the day, you could see it.
Did they ever explain to you about the implosion technology?
I haven't gotten into much implosion. They haven't used that word. They've shown me how there is they poke holes in space, they phase. They've showed me what that is, but they haven't gotten into anything. They've told me that they make this alloy we would call it a forging process. They called it a distillation process, because it's interesting you're talking about implosion technology. I haven't heard about that one, but they talked about how they're able to smash so many different types of molecules together to create things, and they'll hold. They can get they can get the neurons, they can get the magnetic qualities of those atoms to hold somehow. I have no idea. That went way beyond my pay grade. I'm like, how do you do that? And they were trying to explain it to me. But no, that sounds cool. What is this implosion technology? Is that what you called it?
Well, that was the first one I got shown. So back in 2015, I went through big spiritual awakening myself, connected with Star Family. I've had a lot of contacts since then. And I was just sitting at the beach one day and I was just aware of this craft that was in the distance. And the being, he gave me his name, Arnab. So it's a really long story, but like a year later, I met someone else in Perth who'd also connected with the same being and the same name. And I was just like, holy moly, like what just happened? But basically he showed me.
That's cool.
Yeah, he showed me he was on a 7th dimensional starship. And, I have an engineering background too. I'm very interested in the science of like how this all works. And I was like, so, tell me like you're telling me you've got this, higher dimensional spaceship that's hovering within the confines of the 3D time space continuum, but it's invisible, which means it's here in localized space, but it's also not. How does that work? And then I was like, how do you fly it? I'm throwing like 101 questions at them. And anyway, they were just like, well, here on Earth, we use a lot of like what we call explosion technology. So like combustion, or like, you have to release an energy in order for there to be movement. So like, for example, light and sound have to release in order for there to be like a kinetic movement in the other direction. So they were basically saying to me that, when you get into the realm of lossless technologies or free energy, that explosion quality isn't there. And the best way they could describe it to me at the time was, they said, think of it like it's like an implosion technology, where the energy goes into itself inwards, doesn't actually come outwards, and then recycles itself around and basically just keeps going. And I was like, yeah, I mean, that's as far as my understanding went of that. And I was like, I don't understand this. We have nothing on this planet that actually, like, I mean, that to me defies the laws of physics, that we know of. And that was back in 2015. I haven't really looked into it since then, but I just thought maybe they'd told you something similar as well.
It's really interesting, because with that implosion, that's like this piece of, it's not plexiglass, but that's what it looked like, was milky plexiglass. That's what it was doing. It was just sucking all this in and passing it off, and it was able to funnel all of that. So I can completely understand what you're talking about from that perspective.
Yeah, well, I mean, what you're describing, the best thing that I can think of is like, back in the day, I studied PN junctions with different silicon transistors. And like, that's how they layer, like sort of like a nano technology, like layer by layer by layer by layer. So I don't know. I mean, there might be some, similarities in that, but yeah, I just find it very interesting as well. There's a lot out there. And I also know that a lot of their stuff is very much energetic. Like, I mean, those triangular star craft that you speak about, I know they have been replicated, but those ones I've seen as traditional Arcturian, like classic stock standard Arcturian starship. So
yeah, the ones that are black and look like and have like the perfect little lights, those ones are the ones that the black ones. I don't know why. If you're secret military, don't paint it black. That's so obvious. Don't paint it black. Come on, man.
Well, the Arcturian ones are never black. They're always I see them as blue or like shades of that. I do know that the mirror technology that you talk about, I've seen that a lot, because I was taught to use that myself in the astral plane. Because when I go and do missions in the astral plane, I make my energy field reflective, just like the beings do in this density. I've done that in that density because I want to be unseen. So like, I'm very familiar with like some of those things that you're talking about. I've been taught how to use them myself.
Oh, that's fun. Oh, that's fun. Yeah, I've never used them. I've just looked at them and been like, okay, I can see you. I can see you in the reflection, because the reflection is going to slow light slightly more than my eye is going to turn around and see it. So I can see you there. If I turn around, I won't see the being there. And the Arcturian class, those beautiful Oturan craft, they have the soft triangular edges, the ones that, if you ever see one that looks just like a real awkward, bulky, weird slice of pizza, triangle, black, that's Earth's version. Yeah. The softer ones that kind of, if they're triangular, but they have a little more contour, that's your Oturan. Those are the ones we made the flying wings off of. We tried to, reverse the engineer the technology the best we could with what we had. But we're still burning dinosaurs down here, you guys. It's just whatever. We're so far off. Like, oh my God, it's so embarrassing.
One last thing. Have you spoken to Star Family about when open disclosure is going to happen? I mean, that's the burning question for everyone. When are the starships going to land? What do you know about that?
Okay, so here's some scuttlebutt from the peeps. There was supposed to be a disclosure from the Biden-Obama administration in 2014. There was supposed to be like a whole, we're going to come out and talk about all this stuff. And then the big giant kibosh got put on that. So then they had, the big, and that was after the big global disclosure that we all know about that happened. And all of the military people came out. If somebody's watching this later and don't know what I'm talking about, it was a thing. Like, all these military leaders came out. It was this disclosure. Yes, UFOs are real. UAPs are real. Off-worlders are real. Here's the governments who deal with which off-world races. It's time we bring this out. and not one major news outlet covered it. It made like section D of the Billings newspaper. And I think that was like 2010 or 11 or something right in there. So then 2014 was supposed to be the big disclosure, and that whole getting out there and doing the whole global, hey, ETs are real, was supposed to be the springboard for the United States, and everybody was going to come out. Well, they chickened out and didn't do it. And then of course, the United States has been on generalized chaotic mayhem fire since 2017. So that, anything that was going to happen just went to a screeching halt of what the hell is actually happening here. We are to a big tipping point, and I believe that one of the reasons that my Sirius AB friends wanted me to go joyriding with them, not only I asked them, but they also, I think, wanted to visit a little bit, because they really do want to give us technology that will help us with water production, food production, soil cleaning. We've had this horrible train derailment here in Ohio, and it's got this massive toxic cloud that is just going around. The rain coming out of that thing is taking the paint off cars. It's killing birds and fish. I mean, it's so nasty. But of course, we're not talking about it because we don't like to do that in the United States of America. We like to watch the Kardashians. So, it's very traumatic, because what our off-world family want to help us with is to mitigate a critical tipping point that we're standing right on top of right now with climate. So we also have a couple. So the question is, when are they going to come out and pop the ships out? Right now we have some perilous stuff with Horse World. Vlad, his health is poor. He's on some kind of a steroid or something. When I tune into his mental capacity, it's way off. He's way off. And so there's all these decisions being made in this war. That does not lend itself to someone who's going to make reasonable nuclear decisions. And our off-world pals will show up before we annihilate the planet. They have disabled our nuclear capacity all over the planet before, as we know. Malmstrom Air Force Base, right up here over my shoulder by Great Falls, 1967 and 68, they just disabled all the nukes up there, shut them down. And we've watched craft from Sirius AB cut warheads off of flying missiles, and they just fall. So we are, I guess, Isha, the bigger answer I could give you is we really do have our toes up against humans on this planet who are going to make some tremendously poor decisions with nuclear armaments. Because when we split atoms, we disturb subspace. We disturb the quantum space. And so when we're blowing things up, we don't understand that we are disturbing multiverses, splitting atoms up like that. And so that's one of the reasons, because people are like, oh, do they want to save us? Do they love us? I'm like, well, they're compassionate, but they don't want us. We're like the neighbor who is burning the whole neighborhood down, and we have no idea we're doing it. We're the wrecking ball in all these dimensions. So that's what I tell you is actually we need to keep our eyeball on Mr. Putin, because there's going to be some Old West stuff coming later in 2023. And if it gets that Old West, then our off-world pals will pop out and say, done, you're done. We're taking your toys away. No, you're not wrecking this planet. Plus they use it. They use it too for all kinds of stuff.
They told me the exact same thing. They said, if we're on the brink of a World War III, that's it. No nice disclosure. It's boom, starships are here. That's the end of that. They've told me the exact same analogy, like we're kids in the playground. We're taking all the toys away. That's it. Game over, because yeah, I mean, there's a point to which there's free will, like we're in a free will universe and humans have free will and we get to play this little game that we've decided to play. But if it impacts, what they don't want is another Maldex situation, and we are heading very, very closely to that line at the moment. And I've heard the exact same thing where there's one of two scenarios. One is that if we're on the brink of World War III, which Putin may well actually instigate, but they've averted it quite a number of times already, then 100% you will see Galactic Federation jump on this mothership and just like land, and that is the end of that. And the other situation is also that we've had two chances now, like very definitive chances for disclosure. One was in 2012, one was in 2020. And now that 2020 didn't go through and the COVID timeline got instigated, it is now being essentially ordered from Galactic Federation that they can't keep chickening out on the disclosure. And that's why we saw in 2020 all the books and the Netflix series. And it was basically like, guys, if you don't do this now, we will do it for you. Like, that's basically how it's going down. And so the final absolute third deadline is 2032. Open contact must happen before then. If we don't do it on our end and the governments don't play along, again, mothership comes in, that's the end of that. So we're pretty much at endgame one way or another. So it kind of gives me hope. And I think this is, again, why we're starting this particular series. It's like to let people know that, you know, people have been talking about this for a long time, but we really are at that final edge. Like, it's going to happen. It's now. That's it. It's happening. There's no two way about it anymore. So that gives me a bit of comfort, I think. And nice to know as well that other people are receiving similar messages to the messages I've got. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
Oh yeah. They're it's not that far off. I think we'd be pushing it if we made it all the way to 2032.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
I can tell you that he's just super close to saying, hey, if I can't, I'm going to be remembered as the guy that went out with Mother Russia, you know, because his reality is pretty skewed up there. So we'll probably see our galactic family sooner than we think. Yeah. And we were seeing them all over the place just as recently as the beginning of February, you know. Yeah. On this. And I sincerely hope that when this discussion comes out, this would be a fascinating, I'm very excited to share it with people, you know, to get this information out to people. I think it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But thank you so much for joining us today. It's been such a pleasure to meet you.
Well, thank you, Isha. It's such a wonderful pleasure to meet you too.